When it comes to the Philadelphia crime family, the streets run red with betrayal, paranoia, and blood-soaked ambition. The mobsters who clawed their way to the top didn't just leave bodies, they left legacies of terror, whether it was a back-alley execution or a bomb that turned a rival into shrapnel. For these lethal enforcers, there were no second chances, only final outcomes. Join me as we fire into the twisted world of Philly's most feared mobsters, starting with Philip "Crazy Phil" Leonetti, a man who rose from the shadows of Atlantic City to become the deadliest underboss, only to betray the very code he once lived by. Philip Michael Leonetti's story begins in the shadow of Atlantic City's boardwalk, where neon lights cast long, distorted shadows over the dark underbelly of Ducktown. Born on March 27, 1953, Leonetti was a boy abandoned by his father and raised by a mother clinging to survival. But it was his uncle, Nicodemo "Little Nicky" Scarfo, who would shape him into something far more dangerous than a fatherless child. A stone-cold killer with the quiet calm of a coiled serpent. Even at the age of 8, Leonetti's life was a collision of innocence and brutality. Scarfo, a man known for his ruthlessness, saw potential in the boy and decided it was time for a lesson in loyalty. Leonetti was used as a decoy, a small pawn in Scarfo's deadly game. As they drove through the dimly lit streets of New Jersey, Scarfo explained with chilling calm how he had ended a man's life with an ice pick over a trivial slight. For Leonetti, this was not just a story. It was an introduction to a world where violence was the currency of respect. Years passed, and Leonetti's quiet demeanor masked the storm brewing beneath the surface. In 1979, Scarfo ordered him to prove his loyalty yet again by eliminating Vincent Falcone, a man who dared to underestimate the power that Scarfo wielded. The night was suffocating, the air thick with tension as Leonetti approached Falcone. With a cold detachment, he fired 2 shots, watching as life drained from Falcone's eyes. It was his first murder, but it wouldn't be his last. This act of violence sealed his fate, and by 1980, he was inducted as a made man, his fingers still stained with Falcone's blood. As the 1980s dawned, Atlantic City's casinos filled with tourists and gangsters alike. Beneath the glittering facade, Leonetti was building an empire. His hands were deep in the dirty cash of racketeering, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and extortion. He was a millionaire by his early 30s, respected and feared in equal measure. But with success came envy, and the seeds of betrayal were sown within the family. When Philip Tester, the reigning boss, was blown apart by a nail bomb in 1981, it marked the beginning of a bloody power struggle. Scarfo emerged victorious, and Leonetti was rewarded with the title of underboss in 1986. His climb was swift, but his downfall was even faster. The life Leonetti had once embraced was unraveling. Scarfo's paranoia grew, and with it his demands for blood. "You gotta kill people," he would tell Leonetti, his eyes cold and unfeeling, "and you gotta keep on killing them." But the killings took their toll, not just on those who died, but on Leonetti's soul. The brotherhood that once bound them was shattered, replaced by fear and mistrust. Scarfo, the man who had taught Leonetti the rules of La Cosa Nostra, was now breaking them at will, spiraling into madness. Leonetti, disgusted and disillusioned, saw no way out, only the inevitability of prison or death. In 1989, the walls finally closed in. The government's case against the Philadelphia crime family was airtight, and Leonetti was handed a 45-year sentence for racketeering. Scarfo received 55 years, but Leonetti, who had once been Scarfo's most loyal soldier, was no longer willing to sacrifice his life for a man who had lost all sense of honor. Faced with the reality of spending the rest of his life behind bars, he made a choice that would change everything. He became a government informant. His betrayal sent shockwaves through the underworld. Leonetti wasn't just another soldier flipping. He was the highest-ranking member of the American Mafia to break his blood oath. The price on his head was inevitable, a $500,000 bounty placed by the very uncle who had once called him family. But Leonetti didn't flinch. He'd already lived through the worst of it. 10 murders, countless crimes, and the slow erosion of his humanity. After serving just 5 years of his 45-year sentence, Leonetti walked out of prison, a free man, but a marked one. He vanished into the witness protection program, his life a ghostly existence, always looking over his shoulder. But the past has a way of catching up, even if it's only in memory. In 2013, Leonetti published his story, Mafia Prince, laying bare the secrets he once killed to protect. His life was a series of treacherous twists and turns, each more devastating than the last. From the boy used as a decoy to the feared underboss of the Philadelphia crime family, and finally, to the informant who shattered the mafia's code of silence, Leonetti's journey is one of betrayal, power, and the ultimate price of living the life he was born into. The mafia gave him everything: money, respect, power, but it took even more. And in the end, all that remained was a man haunted by the ghosts of those he had killed, forever looking over his shoulder in the dark. When the Philadelphia mob was on the brink of collapse, one man quietly restored its power: Joseph "Uncle Joe" Legambi. No need for flashy suits or headlines. His influence was subtle, calculated, and lethal. In a world where loyalty could vanish faster than a key eyewitness, Legambi's rise wasn't just about survival. It was about reviving a crime family on the verge of ruin. But as every seasoned mobster knows, the higher you climb, the steeper the fall. Let's explore the shadowy rise of Uncle Joe Legambi, the man who restored order to the Philadelphia Mafia without making a sound. In the shadowed corners of South Philadelphia, a name whispered in the alleyways held the kind of weight that could bend knees or break spines: Joseph Anthony "Uncle Joe" Legambi. Born on August 9th, 1939, into a world where the American dream was often overshadowed by harsh realities, Legambi was the son of Italian immigrants who had crossed the ocean in search of a better life. His father, a cab driver, struggled to make ends meet in a city teeming with opportunity and danger. Legambi, one of 4 children, knew early on that the streets could be merciless. He attended South Philadelphia High School but found its lessons paled in comparison to the brutal education of the streets. By his junior year, he dropped out and enlisted in the United States Air Force, where he would eventually earn his high school diploma, a rare legitimate achievement in a life that would soon veer far from the straight and narrow. Unlike many of his future associates, Legambi's criminal career didn't spark in youth. For years, he lived a quiet life, without so much as a whisper of wrongdoing. But at 32, the smooth surface of his existence cracked. Arrested for cigarette smuggling, Legambi found himself pulled into the murky waters of organized crime, where respect was earned not by age, but by the blood on your hands. It was the 1970s, and Legambi was about to enter a world where loyalty was fickle and death was a constant companion. His entry into the mob life began with his association with the Merlino brothers, Yogi and Salvatore Chucky, who had deep roots in Philadelphia's underworld. The bartender job he took at a local haunt was more than just a way to pay the bills. It was his introduction to the life. Legambi became a protege of Chucky Merlino, a man with ties to the feared and ruthless Nicodemo Scarfo, a name that made even hardened criminals shudder. It wasn't long before Legambi was making money hand over fist through illegal bookmaking, carving out a niche as an expert sports handicapper. Football was his game, and he played it well. By the early 1980s, the Philadelphia crime family was a powder keg, with Scarfo as its volatile boss and Chucky Merlino as his equally dangerous underboss. Legambi found himself caught in the web of their violent ambitions. Legambi's path to power was paved in blood, and the first drop came from a job that no one else would dare take. In 1985, Scarfo ordered the hit on Frankie Flowers D'Alfonso, a mafia associate who had dared to defy him by refusing to pay tribute. Legambi, along with Philip Narducci, was chosen to carry out the broad daylight execution, a message to anyone else who thought about crossing Scarfo. The kill was swift, brutal, and public. Everything Scarfo demanded. Legambi was now a made man, officially inducted into the Philadelphia crime family in 1986 at the age of 47. His legacy now carved into the family name with crimson. But his ascent to the stars came crashing back to earth almost immediately. In 1987, Legambi, along with Scarfo and others, was arrested for the murder of D'Alfonso. The trial was a media circus, with prosecutors determined to bring down the men who had terrorized Philadelphia for years. On April 5, 1989, Legambi was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. It seemed his story would end there, behind bars, forgotten and forsaken. But fate, or perhaps the fickle nature of justice, had other plans. In 1992, an appellate court overturned the conviction, citing prosecutorial misconduct. By 1997, Legambi was acquitted at a retrial and walked free, a man who had danced with death and lived to tell the tale. Upon his release, Leonetti found the family in disarray. The streets he had once ruled had turned into a battleground, with Ralph Natali and Joey Merlino at the helm, leading a new generation of mobsters who valued flash over finesse. Leonetti's nephew, George Borghese, was among them, but the old ways were fading fast. In 1999, Merlino and Borghese were arrested, and the family needed a steady hand. Leonetti, with his calm demeanor and calculated moves, was chosen as the acting boss. His parabolic path continued. He steered the family away from the reckless violence that had nearly destroyed it, opting instead for a quieter, more profitable approach. He had a no-show job at Top Job Carpeting, a front that allowed him to pull the strings behind the scenes while remaining out of the spotlight. But even in the shadows, trouble found him. On May 23, 2011, the FBI closed in, indicting Leonetti and 14 others on racketeering charges tied to illegal gambling, video poker machines and loan sharking. The case dragged on, and in 2013, despite a hung jury, Leonetti was denied bail. It seemed the law had finally caught up with him, yet once more he defied the odds. On January 28, 2014, after 2 juries failed to convict him, Leonetti was acquitted and released, a testament to the resilience that had marked his entire life. By 2020, Leonetti's name surfaced again in court documents, this time as the consigliere of the Philadelphia crime family, a position of respect, a kingmaker rather than a king. In a world where most men in his position ended up in a shallow grave, Joseph Leonetti had not only survived, but thrived. He had navigated the treacherous waters of the Mafia, rising and falling, but always landing on his feet. His story is one of a man who knew when to strike, when to step back, and when to let others take the fall. It's a tale written in blood, betrayal, and the unyielding pursuit of power in the shadows of Philadelphia's mean streets.
In the ruthless world of organized crime, where loyalty is fragile and power is earned in blood, Joseph "Skinny Joey" Merlino didn't just survive, he thrived. The flamboyant king of South Philly ruled with style, charm, and a knack for dodging death. But in the Mafia, where alliances shift and betrayal is just a handshake away, even the boldest players must tread carefully. Let's peer into the underworld where Merlino thrived, navigating a landscape where one false step could end it all. Joseph Salvatore "Skinny Joey" Merlino was a man born into the shadows of Philadelphia, where loyalty was bought with blood and power was the only currency that mattered. From his first breath on March 13, 1962, Joey was destined to follow a path carved out by his father, Salvatore "Chucky" Merlino, a notorious underboss of the Philadelphia crime family. The streets of South Philadelphia were Joey's playground, a gritty underworld where names like Scarfo and Testa struck fear, and betrayal was always a heartbeat away. In the dimly lit back rooms of his father's bar, the 9M, young Joey absorbed the secrets of the underworld, witnessing the raw brutality that ruled the Mafia. Here, Nicky Scarfo, a man as ruthless as the devil himself, plotted his rise to power, with Joey's father by his side. But the underworld is unforgiving, and even blood ties can't save you from its grasp. When Chucky's alcoholism became a liability, Scarfo cast him down from underboss to a mere soldier, a demotion that left a bitter stain on Joey's soul. Joey's first taste of true violence came in August 1982. At just 20, he was already marked by the mob's code, a mixture of reckless bravado and cold calculation. Inside the Lido restaurant in Atlantic City, Joey and Salvatore Scafidi, son of a local bookmaker, unleashed a fury that left 2 men battered and bleeding on the floor. It was a vicious display, the kind that earned respect in their world. But respect came at a price. Convicted of aggravated assault, Joey was banned from New Jersey's casinos, yet this was only the beginning. The late 80s saw Joey embroiled in a twisted game of loyalty and revenge. When his father was sentenced to 45 years for racketeering and drug trafficking in 1988, the weight of the family name fell squarely on Joey's shoulders. Determined to reclaim the Merlino legacy, Joey became more than just a street thug. He became a player in the deadly chess match of mob power. The turning point came on a blood-soaked Halloween night in 1989. As Nicky Scarfo Jr. dined at a Bella Vista restaurant, gunmen stormed in, spraying bullets from a MAC-10. The younger Scarfo was hit 8 times but miraculously survived, leaving the city buzzing with rumors. The whispers pointed to Joey, a man who had everything to gain from sending a message that the Scarfo reign was crumbling. Though never charged, Joey's icy denial, claiming he was under house arrest, only fueled the mythos surrounding him. In August 1989, Joey's ambitions led him into the heist of a lifetime, a $352,000 score from a federal armored express truck. But the law was closing in. Convicted in January 1990, Joey found himself behind bars. At the Federal Correctional Institution McKean, he crossed paths with Ralph Natale, a seasoned mobster who saw in Joey the fire needed to ignite a new era for the Philadelphia family. Together, they plotted a coup, assembling a crew of young, fearless men who were ready to challenge the old guard. The Young Turks, as they were dubbed, wasted no time in making their move. With Joey at the helm, they struck fear into the heart of the Philadelphia underworld, launching a campaign of violence that culminated in the assassination of Felix Bocchino in January 1992. But the war was far from over. Released from prison in April 1992, Joey walked into a battlefield where alliances shifted like quicksand. John Stanfa, the new boss, tried to broker peace by inducting Joey and his right-hand man, Michael Tiancaglini, into the family. It was a move born out of desperation, a fragile truce that would soon shatter. The summer of 1993 was a season of blood. On August 5th, Joey and Michael were ambushed in a drive-by shooting orchestrated by Stanfa's men. The bullets tore through the night, striking Joey in the leg and buttocks, while Michael took a fatal shot to the chest. The loss of his closest friend sent Joey spiraling into a thirst for vengeance. Less than a month later, the streets echoed with gunfire again as Joey's crew retaliated, targeting Stanfa and his son in a brazen drive-by on the Schuylkill Expressway. The elder Stanfa escaped, but the message was clear. Joey Merlino was not a man to be trifled with. The war reached its climax in November 1993 when the FBI finally caught up with Joey, arresting him for violating his supervised release. But his time behind bars was brief. When Stanfa was convicted on RICO charges in 1995, it marked the end of one reign and the beginning of another. Released in November 1994, Joey emerged victorious, placing Natale as the figurehead boss while he pulled the strings from the shadows. It was a strategic move that kept the heat off Joey, allowing him to bask in the limelight as a modern-day Robin Hood, throwing lavish parties and helping the homeless, all while continuing to orchestrate the criminal empire from behind the scenes. Beneath the glitz and swagger, Joseph Salvatore Skinny Joey Merlino's rise to infamy was a tale woven with dark ambition and reckless bravado. With his sharply tailored suits and cocky grin, Merlino carved out a niche as the John Gotti of Passyunk Avenue, a South Philly celebrity who knew how to court both the cameras and the streets. He wasn't just a gangster, he was a showman, reveling in the spotlight as he threw extravagant Christmas parties for the homeless and handed out turkeys in the projects each Thanksgiving, all under the glaring eye of the press. But behind this veneer of philanthropy, a storm was brewing. The streets buzzed with whispers about Merlino's arrogance, a trait that made him more enemies than allies. His crew, a younger, brasher faction, radiated an air of invincibility that rubbed many the wrong way. Merlino had a penchant for high-stakes gambling, but when the dice didn't roll in his favor, he made sure he never paid up. The mob had a term for it: guzzling, a tactic he used on both independent bookies and those connected to the underworld. It was a practice that spread fear, but also stoked resentment, leaving a trail of burned bridges and boiling tempers. In 1995, the simmering tension exploded. Louis Tura, a hardened leader of the notorious 10th and Oregon crew, took a vicious beating from Merlino's men. The reason? A failure to pay the Mafia's street tax, a tax that marked the thin line between respect and retribution. Tura, humiliated and enraged, sought revenge. His father, Anthony, called a meeting at their home, where Louis and his gang plotted to end Merlino's reign for good. But the walls had ears, and by January 1998, Louis Tura was found hanging in a New York jail cell, his revenge cut short by his own hand, or so it seemed. 2 months later, as Anthony Tura stepped out of his house to face trial for conspiring to kill Merlino, a masked gunman ended his life with 2 cold shots. It was a hit so clean, so precise, that even the police labeled it an organized crime assassination. Merlino, dragged to court 3 years later for orchestrating the murder, walked away acquitted, his reputation as a Teflon Don intact. But no man rises to the top in this world without making enemies. And by the late 1990s, Merlino had dodged more than 2 dozen attempts on his life. His ties with Steve "Gorilla" Mondevergine, the ruthless president of the Pagans MC, provided muscle when disputes needed settling. Aligning with the Junior Black Mafia only added to his underworld arsenal. When Natale, his mentor turned liability, was arrested for a parole violation in 1999, Merlino saw his chance. He seized control of the crime family, severing ties with Natale and marking a new era of chaos in the Philly underworld. Merlino's power, however, came with a price. On June 28, 1999, the feds finally closed in, indicting him on charges of conspiracy to distribute over 5 kilograms of cocaine. The noose tightened as the charges expanded, dragging racketeering, murder, and attempted murder into the mix. The government's case was bolstered by former allies who flipped, eager to save their skins. Natale, desperate to avoid drug charges, sang like a canary. So did Gaetano Tommy Horsehead Scafidi, terrified of being the next corpse in Merlino's wake. Peter the Crumb Caprio and Ron Previte followed suit, each testimony like a dagger aimed at Merlino's heart. When the verdict came on July 20, 2001, the courtroom was electric with anticipation. The jury's decision was a mixed bag. Merlino beat the murder charges but got nailed for racketeering. Extortion, bookmaking, receiving stolen property, these were the sins that would cost him his freedom. Judge Herbert J. Hutton handed down a 14-year sentence, and as the cuffs clicked shut, Merlino smirked, dismissing his fate with a casual, "Ain't bad, better than the death penalty." But the feds weren't done with him yet. A month later, they tried to pin another murder on him, that of Joseph Sodano in 1996. Yet in March 2004, Merlino dodged the bullet again, walking free on the charge that would have kept him locked away for life. Behind bars, Merlino bided his time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute, Indiana. 12 years ticked by, each one etched with the memory of friends turned foes, and rivals still lurking in the shadows. In 2011, the gates finally swung open, and Merlino emerged into a world that had moved on without him. He was shipped to a halfway house in Florida, then shackled by parole until 2015. Just as he was about to break free, a judge slammed him with another 4 months behind bars for violating parole. A reminder that even out of the game, the past never truly lets go. After his final release, Merlino traded bullets for business, settling in Boca Raton, Florida. He opened an upscale restaurant, Merlino's, serving up his mother's recipes to the well-heeled. But the sins of his past cast long shadows, and by 2016, the restaurant shuttered its doors. Meanwhile, the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board banned him from every casino in the state. A small but stinging blow to the man who once had South Philly at his feet. Merlino's life took another dark turn on August 4, 2016. A RICO indictment swept up 46 men along the East Coast, Merlino among them. Arrested at his Florida home, he was hauled to New York City, charged with racketeering, fraud, and illegal gambling. The accusations flew, claims of dirty deals with the Genovese crime family and a medical fraud scheme that fleeced patients for millions. While his co-defendants folded, taking plea deals, Merlino gambled on a trial. But with the jury deadlocked, he struck a deal to avoid a retrial, pleading guilty to a single charge of facilitating illegal gambling. In October 2019, after another stint in prison, Merlino emerged once more, his steps now more cautious, his gaze ever watchful. He claimed to have gone straight, distancing himself from his old life. But like a ghost, the past continues to haunt him. In January 2023, he reappeared in the news, grinning beside former President Donald Trump at a golf club, their thumbs-up gesture a cryptic symbol of a bygone era. Then, in September 2023, Merlino dipped a toe back into the public eye, launching a sports betting podcast, The Skinny with Joey Merlino. He doled out football picks, his voice still carrying the bravado of a man who played for keeps. But the game had changed, and so had he. When he opened Skinny Joey's Cheesesteaks in South Philly in early 2024, it seemed Merlino was finally content to live out his days slinging sandwiches instead of settling scores. But on May 23, 2024, the restaurant was hit by a firebombing. As the smoke cleared, investigators found Molotov cocktails at the scene, a chilling reminder that in Merlino's world, the past is never truly buried.
When power changes hands in the Mafia, the streets run red. In the world of Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo, respect was earned with brutality and bullets, not words. His rise to the top of the Philadelphia crime family was paved with betrayal, backstabbing, and a body count that still echoes through the city's underworld. From the boxing ring to the mob's throne, Scarfo didn't just play the game, he rewrote the rules. Let's trudge into the blood-soaked legacy of one of the most ruthless mob bosses in mafia history and uncover how he turned Atlantic City into his personal killing ground. Nicodemo Domenico Scarfo, a name that still sends shivers down the spines of those familiar with the crimson-stained history of the Philadelphia crime family, was born on March 8, 1929, in Brooklyn, New York. From the very beginning, Scarfo's life was marked by hardship, violence, and an insatiable hunger for power. His parents, Italian immigrants from Naples and Calabria, could never have imagined that their son would one day rise to control one of the most vicious mafia families in America. But the boy who would become known as Little Nicky had darkness in his soul from the start. In 1941, when Scarfo was just 12 years old, his family relocated to South Philadelphia, a gritty neighborhood where dreams were often shattered by the cold reality of the streets. Here, Scarfo's temper began to bubble, ignited by the harsh environment that shaped him. After graduating from Benjamin Franklin High School in 1947, Scarfo tried his hand at amateur boxing. He fought in dingy clubs across the city, his fists fueled by a fiery rage that would later become his trademark. But despite his ferocity in the ring, Scarfo's boxing career fizzled out, leaving him searching for another outlet for his aggression. Scarfo found that outlet in the criminal underworld. Under the tutelage of his uncle Nicky Buck, a hardened soldier in the Philadelphia mob, Scarfo learned the ways of organized crime. Bartending at his uncle's club by day, he immersed himself in illegal activities by night, absorbing the lessons of power, intimidation, and ruthlessness. In 1954, Scarfo was inducted into the Philadelphia crime family, officially becoming a made man. This was the beginning of a dark journey that would leave a trail of bodies in his wake. Despite his rapid rise, Scarfo's arrogance nearly derailed his ascent. When he refused to marry the daughter of consigliere Joe Rugnetta, a key figure in the family, tensions flared. Scarfo's blatant disrespect threatened to isolate him from the powerful allies he needed. But Scarfo's brutal nature ultimately prevailed, and his reputation as a man who would kill without hesitation earned him the respect and fear of fellow and rival gangsters. Scarfo's first major act of violence came in 1963 when he stabbed a longshoreman to death in a South Philadelphia diner. The argument had been over something as trivial as seating, but for Scarfo, any challenge to his authority was met with deadly force. Though he served only 6 months for manslaughter, the murder marked him as a dangerous man, one who could not be crossed. In the 1970s, Scarfo's fate took a turn when Angelo Bruno, the don of the Philadelphia crime family, sent him to oversee operations in Atlantic City. At the time, Atlantic City was a backwater, a decaying seaside town with little to offer, but Scarfo saw potential where others saw nothing. When gambling was legalized in 1976, Scarfo positioned himself at the center of a burgeoning empire. His cement contracting company, Scarf Inc., became a tool of terror as he strong-armed developers into giving him lucrative contracts. Scarfo's ruthlessness knew no bounds. In 1978, he orchestrated the assassination of Judge Edwin Helfant, who had refused to reduce the sentence of Scarfo's associate, Nick Virgilio. Scarfo personally drove the getaway car, while Virgilio unloaded bullets into the judge as he dined with his wife, making a public spectacle of the killing. The message was clear. Scarfo would destroy anyone who stood in his way. As the 1970s came to a close, the Philadelphia crime family was in turmoil. Angelo Bruno was murdered in 1980, setting off a chain reaction of violence that culminated in the death of his successor, Phil Tester, in 1981. A nail bomb placed under Tester's porch sent shrapnel tearing through his body, leaving Scarfo to seize the throne. But the bloodshed was far from over. Under Scarfo's reign, Philadelphia became a war zone. Paranoia consumed him, driving him to eliminate anyone he perceived as a threat. His brutal campaign against Harry Rickerbean, a rival mobster, resulted in a series of street executions that shocked even the hardened residents of South Philadelphia. The Scarfo-Rickerbean War left more than 20 men dead, their bodies littering the streets like grim reminders of Scarfo's insatiable bloodlust. Scarfo's downfall began in 1984 when he ordered the murder of Salvatore Testa, the son of his former mentor. Testa, a rising star in the family, had become too popular for Scarfo's liking. The betrayal shattered what little trust remained within the Mafia, and soon whispers of disloyalty and treachery surrounded Scarfo. By 1986, the FBI had zeroed in on Scarfo's criminal empire. An extortion scheme involving real estate developer Willard Rouse unraveled when one of Scarfo's hitmen, Nicholas Caramandi, flipped and became a government witness. Caramandi's testimony, combined with that of other turncoats, led to Scarfo's conviction in 1988 on charges of conspiracy, racketeering and first-degree murder. As the guilty verdicts piled up, Scarfo's empire crumbled and his once loyal soldiers deserted him. Even as his world collapsed, Scarfo's cruelty continued to wreak havoc. In November 1988, his son Mark attempted suicide, unable to cope with the shame and torment brought on by his father's infamy. Though Mark was revived, he remained in a coma for decades, a tragic symbol of the destruction Scarfo had wrought on his own family. When Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo was sentenced to 55 years in prison in May 1989, he barely flinched. The man who had once ruled the Philadelphia South Jersey Mafia with an iron fist simply shrugged, resigned to his fate. Just 2 weeks earlier, Scarfo had received a life sentence for the 1985 murder of bookmaker Frankie Flowers D'Alfonso. To top it off, he was already serving a 14-year stretch for extorting $1 million from a developer in Philadelphia. But prison was a familiar place for Scarfo, and he accepted his sentence as just another part of the life he had chosen. Scarfo spent the remainder of his life behind bars. Scarfo died in prison on January 13, 2017, a fitting end for a man who had spent his life surrounded by death. His legacy is one of bloodshed, betrayal, and a ruthless pursuit of power. Even in death, Scarfo's shadow looms large over the Philadelphia crime family, a reminder of the violence that once ruled the streets. When you're born into the mob, your destiny is more tangled than a web of lies. In the deadly game of Philadelphia's underworld, trust is a currency that can bankrupt you in an instant. Salvatore Salvi Testa was the crowned prince of the Philadelphia Mafia. But even royalty isn't safe when the throne is built on treachery. Raised in the shadow of power, Testa soared high into his own brutal legacy, only to be ensnared by the very people who once called him family. Let's unravel the rise and ruthless fall of a mob prince whose ambition led him straight to an early grave. Salvatore A. Salvi Testa was born into a legacy of blood and betrayal on March 31, 1956, in the heart of southwest Philadelphia. With his father, Philip the Chicken Man Testa, climbing the ranks of the Philadelphia crime family, Salvi was destined for the mob from the start. He grew up under the shadow of his father's criminal empire, where loyalty was tested by bullets and trust was a scarce commodity. The streets whispered of his potential, dubbing him the Crown Prince of the Philadelphia mob long before he earned the title. Salvi's early life followed a deceptively typical path. He graduated from St. John Newman High School in 1974 and even took a brief detour into academia at Temple University. But the lure of power and the family business pulled him into the dark world of organized crime. Real estate may have been his official trade, but the true currency he dealt in was fear. The Testa name commanded respect, but in the Mafia, respect is often synonymous with dread. His first ascension came in 1980, after the assassination of Angelo Bruno, the longtime boss of the Philadelphia crime family. The violent power vacuum that followed was filled by Salvi's father, Philip Testa, who seized control of the family in the wake of Bruno's demise. It was a bloody ascension marked by treachery, as rival factions under Harry Riccobene and Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo turned the city into a battlefield. Amid the chaos, Salvi was made in June 1980, his induction into Cosa Nostra sealing his fate. Under the mentorship of his father, Salvi began to build his reputation as a ruthless enforcer, a hitman with a sharp eye and a steady hand. But the Philadelphia mob was an empire built on sand, and when Philip Testa returned home on March 15, 1981, the foundations crumbled. As he approached his modest South Philadelphia residence, a nail bomb detonated beneath his front porch, tearing the Chicken Man apart in an explosion that echoed through the streets. The picturesque Stephen Gerrard Park across the street stood in stark contrast to the carnage left behind. The killing, orchestrated by underboss Peter Casella and Capo Regime Frank Narducci Sr., shattered the Testa family, leaving Salvi to pick up the pieces. In a cold act of vengeance, Narducci was gunned down, and Casella was exiled to Florida, a brief and bitter fall in the Testa saga. With Scarfo now at the helm, the crime family became a reflection of his paranoia and ruthlessness. Scarfo promoted Salvatore Chucky Merlino to underboss, while Salvi, inheriting his father's loan sharking empire, found himself swimming with sharks. The tension only thickened as Scarfo's Atlantic City operations expanded, feeding a criminal machine that thrived on chaos. Salvi's next rise came not from loyalty but from survival. On July 31st, 1982, he was ambushed near his home in the Italian market, a place where life and death often converged. Shotgun blasts tore through the summer air, leaving Salvi bleeding in the streets. The attack, a retaliation for the attempted murder of Harry Riccobene, was carried out by Victor De Luca and Joseph Padula. But Salvi was resilient, recovering from his wounds with a grim determination to maintain his grip on power. The streets spoke of his courage, yet every whispered word reminded him of the precariousness of his position. The final descent began in 1984, when Salvi's loyalty clashed with the petty pride of Chucky Merlino. After breaking off his engagement to Merlino's daughter, Salvi unknowingly signed his own death warrant. Scarfo, always quick to sense a threat, approved the hit on Testa. Merlino's jealousy had set the stage, but it was Scarfo's insatiable paranoia that sealed Salvi's fate. Merlino's decline into alcoholism did little to save him from Scarfo's wrath. He was demoted, cast aside like so many others who had outlived their usefulness. On September 14th, 1984, the final chapter of Salvi Testa's life was written in blood. Lured by promises of loyalty, Salvi found himself staring down the barrel of Salvatore Wayne Grand's gun. The crowned prince, once destined to rule, was left lifeless on the side of a desolate road in Gloucester Township, New Jersey. His body, riddled with bullets, was a grim testament to the cost of ambition in a world where power is always fleeting. The betrayal was complete, orchestrated by the very man Salvi had once served. When Salvi's funeral procession wound through the streets of Philadelphia on September 20th, 1984, it was a somber affair. Over 300 mourners filled St. Paul's Catholic Church in the Italian market, their faces marked by the understanding that no one, not even the son of a boss, was safe from betrayal. As his casket was lowered into the ground beside his parents, Salvi's story became another dark chapter in the bloody history of the Philadelphia mob. Scarfo's reign of terror continued, but with every murder he sanctioned, he sowed the seeds of his own destruction. In the end, Salvi Testa's death was more than a power play, it was a warning. The Philadelphia Underworld was a game where the only certainty was death, and even the crowned prince could be dethroned by a single pull of the trigger.